my people. Look, before we get this show started, I first and foremost want to thank you all, the viewers, and in the audience, the cast, the players of the characters that are in this show. I want to thank you all for your patience. There have been many setbacks. There was a moment where I didn't think I was going to continue, but I was inspired because I knew you all were there to support. So I want to thank you for that. For those of you new here, Master Plane is a play-by-post role-playing game where players create a character by joining the Discord, create your character, and then you submit and post actions to in response to event prompts that I create using the Mythic RPG system. So a lot of those elements are totally randomized. And then once everybody's actions are submitted, I take everyone's actions and tie them all together. I roll the dice, and the results are obviously based on the dice results, which take into consideration the context of the event, your actions, other players' actions, and then it all gets wound up into one single outcome, which is what you're going to see tonight. So if you're into that kind of thing, if you're into role-playing, all my role-playing enthusiasts, I highly encourage you to jump into the Master Plane game by getting into our Discord. The link is in the description. You can find it on the website, pndrpg.com, peoplesanddragons.com. Because the more diverse the cast is, every single character that we get just changes and adds to the chaos of the narrative that's in the world that we're building. I leverage AI tools. I am pro AI. I leverage 11 Labs for narration. I leverage Midjourney for the visuals, and I leverage ChatGPT for editing and script editing. And then once it's all said and done, I release the creation of the episode so you can see how I arrived to the conclusions, the way everything happened and why it happened the way it did. Just so you can see exactly how much creativity went into it, and just so you can see how all the players' actions affected each other, and that's a lot of the fun in the game. So again, if you're into that thing, highly encourage you to get into the game. One last thing before we start, I'm going to start live streaming. I want this to be more engaging and hands-on. I don't want long pauses in between. So I'm going to start building and adding to the story as we go. A lot of the events that happen in this episode will result in a new way that events are going to start being created, that players will be able to just start submitting and posting their actions. And then I'm going to start unboxing those actions, and you're going to have your turn unfold right then and there. So that should be an interesting approach. During these streams, I'll also be reading role-playing and providing commentary on the role-playing that's occurring, because I want there to be more focus on the role-playing occurring in our role-playing Discord. I'll be reading character introductions and providing commentary on that as well. And overall, it's just going to be a good time. Enough chit-chat. Let's get this show started.
As the first light of dawn did pierce the horizon, Ovas, perched high upon a lofty roof within the tower settlement, beheld the rise of the peculiar white sun. Its brilliance stark against the dark canvas of the morn, a sight long obscured by the miasmic veil that had tainted the air. The world, as if reborn, lay beneath this newfound clarity, and in that moment, Ovas, head bowed in reverence, sought solace in solemn prayer. Enveloped in the divine light of Lantir, he beseeched wisdom and guidance for the grave events that were yet to unfold. Samuel Andrews, a figure of quiet dignity, approached with measured steps, halting at a respectful distance, his presence unassuming. Ovas, immersed in his sacred communion, was granted visions by Lanatir, a web of fates and paths, each woven into the grand design of destiny. With his heart heavy with portent, Ovas's eyes opened, burdened by the weight of divine revelation. Samuel, ever patient, awaited the conclusion of this hallowed moment. As Ovas turned to face his companion, he proffered counsel most unexpected: the release of Samuel's steadfast guardsman from his duties. Samuel, taken aback, cast his gaze upon the soldier, a known figure in the town square, and perhaps a familiar presence near Nazareth Lord's abode. Hesitant, yet moved by Ovas's words, Samuel spoke to the guardsman, urging him to find comfort with his kin, and promising to seek justice for the losses he had endured. The guardsman, his eyes brimming with unvoiced thoughts, gave Ovas a parting look of deep contemplation before departing. Ovas then, with a demeanor of grave seriousness, advised Samuel on the importance of maintaining a tightly knit circle, particularly in matters of security. Samuel, initially surprised by this profound insight, soon found himself in agreement, recognizing the wisdom in Ovas's words. Oiji stoodeth before Elendel, the young souls entrusted to his care. His hands, as if by a guardian's grace, hovered o'er their visages, shielding them for a fleeting moment from the harshness of the world. The lads, with eyes wide and hearts unsure, awaited with bated breath the unveiling of their newfound dwelling. In the midst of turmoil, Oiji had labored to forge a haven, a shelter secreted in an alley far from the bloodied cobblestones of the town square. An echo of the massacre that had stolen from these innocents the semblance of a normal life. With a gesture of tender care, he revealed unto them their sanctuary. El, the elder, was overtaken by a burst of joy, his laughter a brief solace amidst the shadows of sorrow. Yet this lightness of heart waned as he beheld the downcast mien of young Del, tears welling in his eyes, pining for the embrace of lost parents. The settlement, a refuge for rogues and the dispossessed, offered little in the way of comfort or answers. Oiji's quest to find the boy's kin had brought forth naught but the echoes of their absence. In this moment, he could but promise his steadfast protection and presence. Their fleeting respite was soon overshadowed by the arrival of Ahlai and her band of marauders, their presence casting a pall over the streets. Oiji, with a nod of grave acknowledgement to Ahlai, guided El and Del into the safety of their new abode, bidding them bar the door against all but himself. Facing Ahlai, Oiji stood unflinching before her formidable retinue. Together, they ventured into the shadow-laden realm of political machinations. Ahlai, her words laced with venom and fervor, declared her disinterest in the artist's fate. Her true aim, she confessed, was to lay bare the concealed nature of Samuel Andrews, whom she deemed a reflection of her own darkness. Oiji, perceiving a chance to shape Alai's intent, concurred and subtly fed her ego. He urged her to persist in her endeavor to unmask the facade of Andrew's justice, to reveal the necessity of a leader of action, not merely of ideals. From the depths of his vestment, Oiji drew forth a letter, its origins veiled in mystery until his mystical insight discerned its author. Eden, the tireless guardian of the makeshift infirmary, laden with traces of potent illusionary magic, the missive was presented to Alai as a means to undermine Andrew's standing as the moral beacon of the settlement. Having sown the seeds of his subtle influence, Oiji took his leave, bequeathing Alai to ponder the letter's message. It spoke of a plea for the support of leadership and a vision for a sanctuary for the wayward, a place of healing and, unexpectedly, a trove of knowledge. The notion was met with derision by her warband, until they perceived the change in Alai's mien. In her silence, an idea, uncharacteristic and nascent, began to blossom. In the very heart of the settlement, a tumultuous assembly gathered, filled with those who had endured recent sorrows. Their voices, heavy with wrath and grief, clamored loud for a spectacle of cruelty against the artist. This fervor, fanned into a raging inferno by Alai's ruffians, created a maelstrom of raw emotion. Amidst this tempest, one of the ruffians, emboldened by the crowd's fury, hoisted an axe aloft, a symbol of their collective yearning for vengeance. Into this cauldron of discord strode Eden, her eyes alight with a resolve that belied her gentle mien. In her grasp, she bore an unwieldy sheet of plywood, thrusting it with force against the chest of the ruffian who led the mob's cries. The sudden heft of the wood caused a brief stillness in the uproar. Zinhera, a stark contrast to Eden's boldness, stood by her side, her wide eyes, filled with a mix of trepidation and admiration, watched as Eden faced the ruffian with a disarming smile. In her hands, she held not only the plywood, but also a hammer and nails, tools of construction, emblems of a future forged in unity, not division. With a voice imbued with both grace and command, Eden challenged the ruffian and his cohorts to transform their ire into the labor of building. Across the square, another scene unfolded, bearing witness to the relentless wrath of the settlement. A ruffian sworn to Alai endeavored to rekindle the flames of vengeance with a display of brutal symbolism. In a swift and deliberate motion, he cast a ripe melon into the heavens. The fruit, a vibrant green against the desolate backdrop of the settlement, traced a serene arc through the air. Then, with a fierce twist of his wrist, the ruffian hurled his hand axe. The blade cleaved the melon asunder, a spray of juice and pulp marking its demise. His voice thundered over the crowd, likening the fate of the melon to that which he envisioned for the artist. The axe's thud upon the ground served as an ominous punctuation to his grim metaphor, reawakening the crowd's thirst for blood. From the shadows, a new figure observed. Father Maxime Maury, his skin sickly pale and his frame but a shadow, watched with an appearance of naivete. Once a master of deceit, now a devotee of dark forces, he concealed his true nature behind a guise of frailty and benevolence. With a subtle movement, Maxime withdrew into the shadows, his form blending into a hidden alcove within the settlement's winding alleyways. In this sanctum of darkness, Maxime engaged in a silent, malevolent communion with an unseen deity. His eyes, the sole visible sign of his presence, shone with a deep connection to the Maiden of the Darkness. Shadowy hands caressed his head, drawing forth his thoughts in a ritual devoid of words. His followers, concealed in the gloom, joined in a haunting chant, their voices merging with the eerie rite. Maxim's supplication was one of guidance and fortification, a plea to further the enigmatic aims of the maiden. The air around him grew heavy, laden with the maiden's presence as she imparted her directives. Her voice, tinged with ire and urgency, commanded the commencement of her physical manifestation into the master plane, igniting fervor among Maxim's acolytes. As Maxim pondered the maiden's arrival, he raised the matter of another dark presence, the wind, inquiring about a possible alliance. The maiden's reply was resolute. Her sovereignty over the darkness was unchallenged. Maxim's suggestion to employ Father Edmund as a pawn in their plans was met with cryptic silence, leaving him to contemplate her will. Once more alone in the darkness, Maxim murmured a prayer, his faith in the maiden's decisions steadfast. With a determined, though frail stride, he departed the alley, resolved to fulfill the ominous tasks laid before him. As the first light of dawn did barely penetrate the dim corridors of the makeshift jail, Samuel Andrews stood steadfast, a sentinel at the threshold of the artist's cell. His visage was as a fortress of resolve, his eyes akin to flint, reflecting the solemn gravity of the day's portents. A day fraught with potential calamity it was, yet his determination wavered not, for justice was to him an unyielding absolute, a sacred oath he was bound to uphold. The growing murmur of the early morn's crowd without, a chorus of unease and expectancy, momentarily drew Samuel from his inner vigil. The arrival of Darren Loneswift, in company with Lazuli, marked a turning of the day's tide. Lazuli, her gaze keen and perceptive, acknowledged the earnestness in Samuel's and others' intents. Her endorsement of the sanctuary's safety in these troubled times was a boon most welcome. Darren, allying his cause with Samuel's, vowed his support and presence at the trial, a bastion against the tempest of discordant voices that threatened to surge forth. The eve past, Lazuli's intrigue had drawn her to seek audience with the artist. Her quest was to fathom the depths of his soul, to discern the man beneath the moniker ere she passed her judgment. Darren, seeing the merit in her intent, had assented to arrange this encounter. Samuel's gaze upon Lazuli was laden with unspoken concern and regard. The artist, though shackled and diminished, yet remained a figure of unpredictable peril. Reluctantly, yet deeming it needful, Samuel granted Lazuli entry. Within the confines of the cell, Lazuli approached the artist with a wary curiosity, akin to her dealings with creatures wild and untamed. The artist, enshrouded in enigma and malevolence, sat aged and sinister, unyielding to her overtures of speech. His dismissive air, however, deterred her not. Noting his neglected state, Lazuli drew forth from her satchel a skin containing a concoction of her own craft, a blend of petrified, venomous substances finely ground. 'Twas a truth serum, yet with a perilous edge. As she proffered the skin to the artist, his reaction, the first glimmer of engagement, was a contemplative acknowledgement of her gesture. Meanwhile, outside the cell, the arrival of Willem Toth and his companion, Sky, brought a new dimension to the unfolding scene. Sky, a figure striking in appearance, bore skin pale as death with blackened veins and a stature modest, yet robust. Her countenance, marred by a half-Glasgow smile scar, spoke of endurance and defiance. Her hair, black as the raven's wing and braided long, swayed with her movements. Curls framed her visage, drawing focus to her eyes, gray and piercing. She emanated a gentle authority, her voice soft, yet underlain with a firmness. In her demeanor, one might sense a nurturing, almost maternal essence, combined with a readiness to leap into peril for the protection of others. Adorned in a breastplate and heavy greaves, a silver dagger ever at her hip, Sky's attire bespoke readiness for the unforeseen challenges of life within the settlement. Willem introduced her as a patron, now under his care due to a poisoned wound. Her opinions Sati revealed through her observations and remarks. Her insightful gaze, empathetic and discerning, swept across those gathered, silently weighing the stakes of the moment. As the interrogation of the artist was discussed, Willem's concern for the hazards of such a private meeting was evident. His apprehensions were cut short as chaos erupted within the cell. The waterskin, transformed into a weapon of ice and blood, burst asunder, releasing a deadly barrage. Lazuli, her reflexes honed in wildlands, narrowly avoided the assault. Her response, a sphere of blue flame, filled the cell, dispelling the artist's icy magic in a surge of heat and light. The force of the explosion hurled the artist against the wall, the sound echoing through the corridor. Samuel and Darren, alerted by the tumult, burst through the door, coming to Lazuli's aid. Despite her shaken state, she declared she had seen enough and departed post-haste, crossing paths with Oiji, who had come for his own inquisition. Willem, adamant against further solitary encounters with the artist, voiced his concerns. Oiji, seeking to persuade them of his unique aptitude in dealing with the sorcerer's magic, was met with Willem's firm stance on prioritizing collective safety. As Oiji entered the cell, he was immediately struck by the lingering energies of the recent magical clash. "You brought him water," he mused, piecing together the events. Willem's countenance bespoke great concern as he did counsel Oiji regarding the artist's formidable powers, stressing the import of formal proceedings. Laying a hand upon Oiji's shoulder, he whispered low, inquiring if perchance there existed a ledger documenting the comings and goings of rogues within the settlement, particularly one bearing the artist's true name. Such formality, he deemed, was essential in the levying of charges. Oiji, whilst denying knowledge of such a record, intimated that his methods of interrogation might yet reveal further secrets. Sky, her curiosity kindled by Oiji's allusion to his arcane techniques, stepped nigh, her eyes alight with a blend of skepticism and intrigue. Upon Willem's introduction, Oiji expounded upon his mystical arts, suggesting the depth of hidden truths he might uncover. As the trio entered the cell, the door swung shut behind them, sealing their fate with the artist. The chamber was laden with the vestiges of arcane fire and ice. Within these confines, the intersection of mundane and mystical was stark. The presence of Sky and Willem, each bearing their own burdens and intentions, contrasted with Oiji's readiness to delve into the arcane. The artist, a figure at once pitiable and perilous, sat ensnared in the web of their collective fates. Oiji, armed with his mystical prowess, prepared to probe the depths of the artist's mind, seeking answers that lay shrouded in shadow. Sky and Willem, witnesses to this arcane exploration, stood ready, each grappling with their own thoughts and doubts. The air crackled with the unseen energies of the arcane, a silent yet potent force that promised both revelation and risk. Oiji, akin to a specter of old, loomed ominously. He knelt, bringing his visage nigh unto the artist, whose eyes flickered with the dim lights of terror and remembrance. The artist, exhausted, sat in a sea of mental tumult, feeble and barely cognizant of the dark ingress that loomed. With sudden and arcane ferocity, Oiji did unleash a maelstrom most unseen, a tempest of sound and chaos that burst forth from the very soul of the artist, resounding through the labyrinthine caverns of his mind. A cacophony of memories, once shackled, now danced in chaotic disarray. The artist's head did slump, akin to a marionette bereft of its strings, as his psyche became a morass of shattered thoughts. Sky, a witness to this dire spectacle, tensed instinctively, her protective nature roused by the evident suffering of the artist. Willem, ever perceptive of the precarious nature of this interrogation, laid a hand of reassurance upon her shoulder, a silent entreaty for forbearance. Sky, her countenance a tapestry of concern and readiness, kept her gaze fixed upon Oiji, her hand inching, almost imperceptibly, towards the silver dagger sheathed at her hip. Oiji's eyes, alight with an ethereal glow, did pierce the veil of chaos that enshrouded the artist's arcane mind. He beheld thoughts, like unto stormy clouds of energy, each a repository of secrets, awaiting revelation. With a precision most surgical, Oiji commenced his inquisition, his queries honed to draw forth the hidden lore of magics. He knew well the fleeting nature of this chance. The window to these jumbled secrets was closing apace. As Oiji interrogated, instruments ethereal in nature, akin to a surgeon's tools, yet imbued with the essence of the arcane, materialized betwixt his fingers. With each disjointed utterance from the artist, these instruments transformed, attuned to the nature of the secrets uncovered. Oiji's discovery of magic's ancient and mythical was akin to unearthing hidden treasures, each revelation more wondrous than the last. The very air within the confines of the cell grew dense with the weight of arcane energy as Oiji delved ever deeper. Sky's disquiet mounted with each passing moment, her instincts at odds with the necessity of Oiji's methods. Willem, torn between his role as mediator and his concern for the artist's well-being, grappled with the moral quandaries of their quest for knowledge. As Oiji's instruments grew more intricate, his manipulations more invasive, the artist writhed in torments both physical and mental. Sky, unable to abide in action, stepped forth, her very presence a force to be reckoned with. She challenged Oiji, accusing him of transgressing moral bounds. Oiji, fully cognizant of the ethical precipice upon which he balanced, sought to justify his actions, vowing the harm would be minimal and fleeting. Yet Sky, her eyes a tempest of emotion, stood unswayed, her hand clasping the hilt of her dagger, a silent but potent warning. In the midst of this ethical maelstrom, Oiji's focus narrowed upon a memory most vivid within the artist's mind, a spell of immense potential and power. As he probed this memory, the artist's state, both of body and mind, deteriorated rapidly, his words devolving into incoherent ramblings of meta-magic. At length, sensing the perilous brink upon which they teetered, Oiji stayed his hand. With a mere gesture, he soothed the artist's frayed mind and mended his wounds. The tension that once pervaded the room ebbed away, leaving naught but a heavy silence in its wake. Oiji, his own mind racing with the secrets newly unearthed, offered a terse word of thanks to the artist for his cooperation. Proposing a revisit post-trial, he took his leave, departing a chamber now filled with relief, ethical conundrums, and an artist wearing a tired yet knowing grin. In the murky gloaming, Asao treadeth westward, her path leading her from the familiar bounds of the tower settlement into realms untrod. With nary a glance backward, her heart was set upon the strange and unfathomable darkness that had beset the land. She yearned to behold with her own eyes the consequences of the artist's sorcery, to fathom the depths of this shadowy affliction. As she ventured forth, it seemed as though she wandered through an endless night, a corridor of unyielding shadows, where naught but the black soil beneath her feet was her constant companion. The world around her was bereft of life and light, save for the faint glimmer of the dim white sky above, offering scant illumination. Many hours into her journey, the wilderness began to reveal itself, a gradual emergence from the abyss. She chose paths better lit by the wan light, navigating through this strange and somber landscape. It was as if she had been traversing a dream, one wrought of shadows and whispers of forgotten lands. Suddenly the oppressive darkness did part, as if by some unseen hand unveiling a vast expanse of land. A flat, desolate ranch lay before her, its presence abrupt and startling in its solitude. No beast nor rogue was in sight, yet the signs of life were evident in the distant smoke of a fire, suggesting recent habitation. With cautious steps, Asao explored the newly revealed domain. The ranch bore the marks of hasty departure, doors agape, embers still glowing, and skins stretched upon the racks. Nearby, a collection of fine beast carcasses lay unattended, hinting at a treasure hastily forsaken. Within the dwelling, the remnants of hunters' lives were strewn about. Tools, arrows, and knives lay scattered amidst the desolation. A gruesome sight arrested her gaze. The lifeless body of an alchemist, ensnared in thorned vines that bore the scars of a violent struggle. More of these menacing traps lay nearby, silent sentinels of a forgotten conflict. Choosing to leave these artifacts untouched, Asao pressed on in her exploration. She chanced upon a secluded cove, a place where creatures were once nurtured. There, amidst the remnants of a failed hatchery, she espied a lone egg, still intact, yet on the brink of birth. Though curiosity beckoned, she refrained from disturbing the egg, mindful of the unknown. As twilight embraced the land, Asao resolved to abide at the ranch for the night. She partook of the stew and roast left behind, a solitary diner amidst the echoes of vanished lives. Beside, the crackling fire, with the enigmatic egg her only companion, she pondered the riddles of the darkness and its portents for the world beyond. Questions myriad filled her thoughts. Whither had the ranch's dwellers vanished? Were they too victims of the shadows that roamed these lands? Should she return to the settlement with her findings, or venture forth in quest of greater truths? In the embrace of the night, Asao surrendered to slumber. The fire's warmth and the gentle stirrings of the egg her only solace. Mayhap the morrow would bring clarity, or yet more mysteries in this land of shadows.
If you're enjoying the show, take a moment to like, subscribe, and consider, if you want to support the channel even further, consider joining the Patreon. The link is in the description. By joining the Patreon, obviously you're helping the show. Also, you'll get access to insight and some behind-the-scenes factoids about the production of the content as well. So, just something to consider. Look, I'm just appreciative that you're even here watching the show to begin with. So, that said, I have some merch coming that you'll be able to buy if you want. Willem, his character he's probably one of the best chefs that we have. So we have we have this Willem apron, nice white and black finish, and then we also obviously we have some collectibles that we have some collectibles and some Nazareth art. These are a few of the pieces that I like the most when I was creating the episode, and I wanted to turn it into some tangible physical art that you can get your hands on. You can find a link to that in the description as well. Every purchase goes towards supporting the channel, so if that's something that you would like to do, there you have it. All right, let's get back to the show.
A small band of militia, deeming themselves worthy to heed Nazareth's call, gathered in the presence of their God King. Though their courage was bolstered by their fervent belief in Nazareth, it was clear to his discerning eye that they were a ragtag assembly, weakened, injured, and ill-prepared for the challenges that lay ahead. Nazareth, beholding this meager assemblage, gestured towards the gathered forces, and then to the heap of armaments, his visage marred by perplexity. How could it be that this was all the strength and steel the settlement could muster? The truth of the matter weighed heavily upon the air. The ablest of rogues, those wielding sharp blades and keener wits, had already congregated in the town square, drawn by the looming spectacle of the artist's trial. Nazareth, his disappointment barely concealed, inquired after any tidings regarding the trial's preparations. The response came in the form of timid nods and hushed voices. His followers relayed that Samuel Andrews and his cohort had remained tight-lipped, their morning spent in the interrogation of the artist. Yet whispers of a sighting had reached their ears. Nazareth's gaze drifted towards the town square, his eyes piercing the distance as he watched the unfolding scene. In his mind, strategies and contingencies began to form, each thread weaving into the next as the trial edged closer to its commencement. He stood, a figure of contemplation and calculation, poised to make his next move in this intricate game of power and influence. The air around him was charged with anticipation, the murmurs of his militia a faint backdrop to the steady rhythm of his thoughts. In this moment, Nazareth stood not just as a leader, but as a chess master, each piece on the board known to him, each possible move contemplated with the precision of a strategist. The trial, a nexus of fate and fortune, beckoned, and Nazareth, with the weight of his decisions heavy upon him, ridded himself for whatever course he must take. In the heart of the settlement, the populace did gather within the confines of the square. The greater part of them raised voices, clamoring for justice, whilst a vocal minority, emboldened by darker desires, cried for a fate most grim. Slow death. The words echoed from the lips of Alai's warband, spreading like wildfire through the crowd, their fervor only intensifying as Samuel Andrews emerged into the square, dragging the artist in tow. With him, several others made their presence known, among them Darren Loneswift, who vigilantly shielded the artist from the crowd's hurled objects with his steadfast shield. Alai, perched upon her steed, surveyed the scene with a twisted smile, reveling in the seething anger that coursed through the assembly. Her eyes sought a particular tell in Samuel's demeanor, yet found it not. His visage remained composed, focused, and tranquil amidst the storm. All stood poised, as if by some unseen choreography, awaiting the proceedings' commencement. Then, as if born of the very air itself, a figure both lean and muscular, cloaked in gray, stepped forth. Clad in chainmail beneath her heavy armor, she moved to the forefront of the gathering. With a deliberate gesture, she lowered her hood, revealing a visage framed by a long brown French twist, a solitary curled strand of hair gracing the right side of her face, her hair parted thusly. This was none other than Denise de Carolingien, her arrival unheralded yet commanding. Denise bestowed upon Samuel a nod of recognition, then turned her gaze upon the crowd. Her eyes, fierce and unyielding, demanded silence, quelling the clamor with but a look. Intent on witnessing justice's true course, she began to recite a prayer of battle over the trial. Her voice, both stern and melodic, wove through the air, casting a spell of solemnity over the gathered throng. As she spoke, her presence seemed to transcend that of a mere warrior. She stood as a bastion of righteousness amidst the tumult of passions and cries for vengeance. The crowd, erstwhile unruly, found themselves caught in the gravity of her words, the prayer resonating with a power that hearkened back to ancient rites of justice and valor. In this moment, Denise de Carolingien was not merely a figure in armor. She was the embodiment of the trial's gravity, a sentinel standing watch over the delicate balance between retribution and justice. Her arrival marked a turning point in the proceedings, her prayer a clarion call that echoed through the hearts of all present. Samuel Andrews, his voice raised to cut through the murmurs of the assembly, proclaimed, "We, the steadfast survivors of Tower Settlement, are here gathered in the shadow of our shattered realm, devoid of sovereign rule, but bound by a shared need for justice amongst our kin. I, Samuel Andrews, by the collective will of our community, stand before you to oversee this gathering." His gaze swept across the throng, steadfast and unwavering. In this land, where law and order hang by the merest of threads, we must uphold our own brand of justice. This day, we are confronted with a matter most grave, a deed that hath shaken the fragile pillars of our very existence. Skinny, stepping forward, unfurled a worn piece of cloth, serving as a makeshift document, and began to read aloud. "Thou, sorcerer, art accused of a grievous act, one that hath extinguished more than 50 souls from our midst. Thy actions have rent asunder families, and sown despair deep within the heart of our fellowship, and perhaps beyond. In thy reckless pursuit of thine own ends, thou hast wrought havoc upon our world, robbing many of a future yet to be." A hush fell upon the air, the heavy weight of the accusation looming over all. Samuel Andrews' eyes locked with those of the artist, his countenance a meld of anger and iron resolve. Aile, driven by fury, demanded immediate and brutal retribution, and her warband, arming themselves with the détailleurs at hand, stirred the crowd into a renewed frenzy. Suddenly, Ovas, suffused with a resplendent golden light, emanated Lanter's benevolent radiance. Bathed in this warm, soothing glow, the crowd's anger began to ebb, replaced by a belief that justice would indeed be served this day. Their motives now driven by a newfound optimism. Samuel, buoyed by confidence, beckoned the first witness forth. Zinhera, intent on repaying her debt to Samuel for his protection during the massacre, stepped up to deliver a truthful account of the events she had witnessed, detailing the response of the rogues that had rallied together. She recounted the tavern's happenings from inception to tragic end, making clear Samuel's vehement opposition to the artist's schemes, casting the artist as the orchestrator of the calamity. Zinhera, gazing upon the faces twisted in anger, felt a turmoil within. Her altruistic nature was troubled by the thought of the artist's impending torture and demise. Internally, She grappled with Ayanga's perspective, the elemental within her viewing the artist as a wielder of power, entitled to exert his will upon the cosmos. In Ayanga's eyes, the artist's failure to protect himself from his current plight rendered his end a mere inevitability. Zinhera, aware of the necessity to keep Ayanga's views unvoiced, remained silent on this count, knowing well the consequences of speaking such thoughts amidst these just and kind-hearted folk. She glanced toward Samuel, who gave a nod of approval, signaling her to step down from the stand. The crowd, once more stirred by Zinhera's testimony, seemed further incited towards vengeance. Ovaz, raising his hand, calmed the throng again, his radiant robe fluttering in the gentle gale of light. He declared his wish to speak with the artist. Samuel, acknowledging this request, invited Ovaz to take the stand. In the midst of the gathered throng, a marvel did occur. From the very ether, a lantern of shimmering gold, imbued with the wisdom of Lantir, materialized and levitated above the artist's head. Its light, pure and revealing, cast down upon him, illuminating that which was hidden from mortal sight. Sigils, arcane and mysterious, etched upon the artist's flesh and garb, now lay bare for all to see. This celestial light, a guide to Ovaz's heart, steered his questions and aided in the interpretation of the artist's likely enigmatic responses. Ovaz, bold in his quest for truth, posed his first query with great directness. "What exactly didst thou accomplish with thy ritual?" The artist, casting his gaze upon the lantern and then to Ovaz, erupted into a fit of unsettling laughter. Skinny, beholding this, was visibly perturbed. Lasuli, ever vigilant, braced herself for further sorcery from the unhinged sorcerer, her vipers strike at the ready. Undeterred, Ovaz persisted, seeking to fathom the artist's motives, however twisted they might be. "Why didst thou undertake such a deed?" he implored. A brief cessation in the artist's mirth ensued, followed by a profound silence. Ovaz repeated his question, only to be met with silence anew. It was then that a rock, hurled from the crowd, crashed against the glowing translucent shield that protected Ovaz and the artist, its shattering sparking a tumult amongst the onlookers. Alai, seizing upon the unrest, began to fan the flames of the crowd's desire for the artist's end. Yet Ovaz, with a gesture, quelled the growing disquiet and posed a question that seemed to touch a nerve within the artist. Leaning in, he asked, "What can be done to combat the darkness thou hast unleashed?" At this, a flicker of something, recognition perhaps, or contemplation, crossed the artist's face. The air around them grew charged with anticipation. The crowd, momentarily silenced, awaited the artist's response. The tension was palpable, a blend of fear, anger, and desperate hope mingling in the atmosphere. Ovaz, steadfast in his pursuit of understanding, stood resolute, his eyes fixed upon the artist, waiting for the words that might hold the key to unraveling the enigma of the darkness that now shrouded their world. The artist, his countenance wrought with a bewilderment most sincere, spake unto the assembly, "That which thou callest darkness is verily life." His eyes wandered, lost in some distant thought, as he murmured of a new canvas. Ovaz, amidst this revelation, grappled with the insights bestowed by Lanatire, which bore a gravity most unsettling. He came to the stark realization that he alone was the living remnant of Lanatire's light within the master plane. The absence of Lanatire's creations, be they patrons, creatures, or edifices, signified a loss most grievous. The thought that a sorcerer of such destructive power might continue to draw breath within this world was a notion that shook Ovaz to his very core. Yet in this mire of despair, Lantyr's voice, clear and resonant, opposed such dark musings. Ovaz was enveloped in a revelation. Not only was the artist's life to be spared by Lantyr's decree, but the darkness itself, according to Lantyr, harbored a potential beyond comprehension, a realm of non-existence ripe for creation and illumination. Lantyr, in a monologue of spiritual profundity, reflected upon the days past where his light, though present, was but a mere glimmer against the overwhelming shadow and malevolence that pervaded the plane. This moment, he proclaimed, was a crucible for repair and enlightenment. Amidst Ovaz's trance-like pondering, Samuel Andrews, impatience and resolve etched upon his visage, seized the artist by his shoulders. His voice, firm and demanding, sought clarity. "How hast thou wrought such ruin upon the master plane? Canst this darkness be undone? What fate hath befallen realms beyond our sight? Who art thy masters, and who counts amongst thy allies?" Each question, a plea for understanding, was met with naught but the artist's mocking laughter. The artist, telling the fallen as if to scorn Samuel's quest for truth, was abruptly silenced by Samuel's wrathful blow. Ovaz, striving to uphold a semblance of order, calmed Samuel's rising ire, urging him to remain true to the laws they had set. Within his heart, Ovaz wrestled with Lantyr's revelations and the seeming impossibility of sparing such a malevolent being. Sky, observing Ovaz's passage, noted the tumult of emotions that played across his visage. She perceived that the matter at hand was far more complex than the common rogue could fathom. The crowd, blinded by their thirst for vengeance, failed to grasp the need for answers rather than retribution. Sky's gaze then fell upon Ally, a figure of daunting presence atop her steed, her rhetoric fueling the fervor of those around her. Dissatisfied with the artist's lack of confession, their chants grew louder, demanding Samuel to enact the artist's demise. It was in this moment of heightened tension that Willem stepped forth, his proclamation resonating through the square. Asserting that the artist had spoken all he would, Willem raised his hands, and a chill descended upon the air as the boundary twixt life and death grew ever more tenuous. "Let now the voices of the departed be heard," Willem declared, as ethereal forces, barely visible to the naked eye, began to stir about him. His eyes and tattoos, aglow with a teal radiance not of this world, betrayed his possession by otherworldly spirits. He spoke with the voices of the slain. First, a female rogue cut down in her prime, then a young man, his life cruelly snatched away by the miasma. Spirit after spirit came forth, speaking through Willem, their voices laden with sorrow and wrath, unanimously calling for the artist's end. At length, Willem severed the spiritual bond, the weight of the soul's anguish proving too great. Collapsing to one knee, he was aided by Sky, who helped him regain his footing. Willem, his gaze sweeping over Samuel and then the crowd, pronounced the judgment clear. The will of the departed far outweighed that of the living. With a mind now quieted, having given voice to the restless dead, Willem withdrew from the trial, his strength spent from the spectral communion. The crowd's cries for the artist's death resounded anew, a thunderous chorus demanding retribution as the specter of justice and vengeance hung heavy over the square. Samuel, poised to deliver the verdict by the common will, paused to inquire if any amongst the assembly had aught else to add concerning the artist's guilt or innocence. In that moment, a deep bass voice resonated across the settlement square, drawing all eyes to Nazareth Lord, who, flanked by a small cadre of armed rogues, made his approach to the trial area. The crowd, as if by some unspoken command, parted to allow his passage. Tension gripped the air. Darren Loneswift's grip on his shield tightened, and Denise de Carolignan began to whisper a silent prayer under her breath. Samuel, his gaze fixed upon Nazareth, met him with a stare as cold as winter brick, his resolve unshaken by the presence of the towering figure. Samuel, ever the just overseer, would not deny any who sought to question the artist, be it in his defense or to affirm his guilt. Thus he watched, unflinching, as Nazareth Lord took his stand before the artist, his entourage forming a barrier twixt him and the crowd. A hush fell over the square, the tension palpable as the moment stretched on. "I have but one query for the sorcerer." Nazareth's voice boomed towards the assembly, before he turned to face the artist directly. "Dost thou bow to thy king?" The crowd's visages twisted in bewilderment at the question. The artist, after a moment's contemplation, offered a slight grin and then a bow of his head towards Nazareth. Suddenly, with a swift motion, Nazareth swung his arm towards Darren Loneswift, who braced against the assault with his shield. The impact was such that the shield shattered into twain, sending Darren flying from the platform. Nazareth then raised his hand skyward, his palm erupting with a maelstrom of blue and black magic. His incantation, however, was abruptly interrupted as Samuel's chain whipped towards Nazareth's torso, striking with a flurry before wrapping around his forearm, pulling him against his will. Nazareth, summoning his brute strength, whipped Samuel towards him. Yet unexpectedly, Samuel held his ground, matching the God King's might. In this moment of struggle, Lazuli, seizing the opportunity, delivered several swift strikes with her battle staff upon Nazareth's hardened flesh. Though her blows were true, they seemed to leave the Titan unscathed, the blunt force having little effect upon his formidable form. Skinny and Denise, in the meantime, fell back, their lips moving in silent incantations, weaving unseen mystical forces upon the battlefield. Their concentration was nearly shattered, as a violent, crackling bolt of lightning tore through the air, striking Nazareth squarely in the chest, with an explosion upon impact. The square erupted into chaos, the crowd recoiling from the display of raw power. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and the resonating echo of the thunderous strike. A hush, tense and expectant, fell upon the throng, all eyes turning to discern the source of the sudden, violent strike. Amidst the crowd, Zinhera stood, her hand outstretched, smoking and crackling with the raw energy of unleashed lightning. Her veins glowed a vibrant blue, spread in like a web across her flesh, while silvery streaks began to manifest in her hair. Her visage transformed, now twisted in a frantic, enraged scowl, illuminated by the crackling blue glow within the irises of her eyes. Zinhera was no more. Ayanga had usurped control, her elemental fury unleashed. As the smoke cleared around Nazareth's shoulders, he revealed a grin, wide and mirthful, impressed by the lightning's wrath. Denise, her prayer concluded, moved to confront the melee, but found her path obstructed by several of Nazareth's converted acolytes. Skinny, axe in hand, rushed to her aid, calling out warnings to the civilians to stand down. Yet they heeded not, and lunged forth with strikes aimed to harm. Suddenly, from beneath the fractured stone, a legion of thick wooden vines erupted, ensnaring the attackers, binding their limbs. The vines constricted with such force that bones snapped, leaving the assailants incapacitated upon the ground. Seizing this moment of respite, Skinny hastened past them to join the fray at the forefront. Nazareth, attempting once more to wield his dark magic, was thwarted by another bolt of lightning, staggering him backward. Lazuli, airborne, unleashed a barrage of fireballs before descending upon Nazareth with her staff. The staff shattered against his monstrous form, now clad in leviathan scales that shimmered with a black and purple aura. Nazareth, his movements swift and powerful, swung towards Lazuli. She evaded, yet the ground quaked beneath her from the force of Nazareth's blows, causing her to falter. Ayanga, seizing the moment, swept Lazuli from harm's way, sparing her from Nazareth's devastating strike. Ayanga, levitating, darted through the air with lightning reflexes, evading Nazareth's furious attempts to strike her down. Then, spying an opening, she unleashed a point-blank blast of lightning upon Nazareth's face, shattering his scales and hurling him onto his back. Nazareth, rising, bore a visage partially shorn of its jaw, his scales penetrated by Ayanga's potent magic. He acknowledged, perhaps for the first time, an adversary of worthy metal, his eyes glowing with a deeper red, his thirst for blood intensified. Yet amidst his bloodlust, a flicker of doubt. Had he met his match? Regaining his footing, Nazareth prepared to engage the elemental spirit once more. Upon the crowded square, where the fate of worlds hung in the balance, Darren Loneswift's voice rang clear and true, imbued with the urgency of their dire circumstance. Hearken, for we stand at the brink of unknown realms within the master plane, he intoned. Thou, Nazareth Lord, in life dost hold a worth far greater than in death. In these realms uncharted, thy might and wisdom may yet guide us through the shadow. His words, steeped in prudence and insight, sought to quell the storm of fury within the God King, suggesting a union forged in the fires of necessity amidst the mysteries of this new world. Nazareth, a figure both fearsome and formidable, stood riven with internal conflict, his visage betraying a tempest of emotions. The sight of his loyal but now subdued followers, coupled with the resonant truth in Darren's counsel, stirred within him a flicker of reason. The seeds of calm, sown by Darren's words, began to take root, tempering the rage that had long fueled the God King's actions. Yet, as tranquility beckoned, the artist, ever the agent of discord, wove his malevolent words, aiming to rekindle the fires of Nazareth's wrath. With guile and cunning, he questioned the God King's supremacy, challenging him to assert his might or risk being deemed unworthy of their allegiance. These barbed words, cunningly crafted, reignited Nazareth's desire for battle. His passion for the fray reawakened with a fervor akin to a second wind. With a roar that shook the very stones of the square, Nazareth launched himself at Ayanga, only to be met by the formidable strike of Skinny's axe. Yet the weapon proved no match for Nazareth's impenetrable scales, shattering upon impact. Ayanga, swift and ethereal, let loose a bolt of lightning, striking Nazareth with devastating precision. The blast rent asunder his scales, exposing him to the elements. in that critical moment of vulnerability. Samuel's chain, a weapon of both steel and resolve, whipped through the air. The chain struck Nazareth's skull with a gruesome force, sending the God King sprawling to the ground, his form bloodied and unmoving. Ayanga, her heart still ablaze with vengeful fury, readied herself to deliver the death blow. Yet in the instant before her wrath could be sated, she found herself enveloped in the radiant, loving embrace of Lantier's light. This divine luminescence, gentle yet powerful, soothed her raging spirit, lulling her into a deep, tranquil slumber. Overcome by the exertions of battle, she succumbed to unconsciousness, cradled safely in the protective arms of Ovaz, aglow with the golden light of Lantier's grace. Samuel Andrews stood, a figure both revered and burdened by his mantle of authority. The air was thick with anticipation, a tense silence enveloping the throng. Every eye was fixed upon him, every ear attuned to the words that would seal the artist's fate. Yonder, even Willem, secluded in his chamber of solitude and shadow, peered through the frost-kissed window, his gaze intent upon the scene below. The artist, a forlorn figure slumped in resignation, awaited the judgment that would determine his earthly end. The verdict born of the collective will of the settlement rang clear and irrevocable through the square. Guilty of mass murder, the artist faced the gravest sentence known to their law, the finality of death. A roar of anger and retribution erupted from the crowd as weapons were brandished and vengeful steps began to close in upon the condemned. In this moment of impending doom, Denise de Carolingien, ever vigilant, summoned her vines to form a barrier, their tense whips holding the impassioned crowd at a safe distance. Skinny, with a gesture of respect and solidarity, offered his axe to Samuel Andrews, a symbol of the grave responsibility that now rested upon his shoulders. Denise, her mind strategizing, proposed the swift finality of a crossbow bolt. Yet Samuel, his resolve manifesting in a different form, declined both instruments of death. Grip firm and unyielding, he seized the artist by his locks and dragged him towards Ally and her expectant warband. They, caught in a maelstrom of anticipation, awaited the spectacle of execution. Ally, her eyes never straying from Samuel, watched with a keen and calculating gaze, her thoughts veiled and deep. Samuel, casting the artist to the ground before Ally and her mount, relinquished the role that had been thrust upon him. "I took thy moment from thee, and now I return it," he declared. "I am not an executioner." His words, laden with significance, marked not only his refusal to end the artist's life, but also a stand against the very concept of execution as justice. With a turn of his back, he walked away from the trial site, leaving behind a multitude fraught with confusion and unspoken questions. His departure resonated through the square, a silent testament to the complexities of justice and morality in a world bereft of established law. It posed a question most profound. What is the true nature of justice in a land torn asunder by sorcery and strife? Willem, from his vantage point, watched the unfolding drama with a contemplative gaze. The artist, now subject to the whims of the crowd, remained a figure of desolation, his destiny hanging in the balance. Upon the square, now a theater of grim finality, Ally's voice, sharp and unyielding, pierced the air. She denounced Samuel Andrews for his perceived lack of resolve, her words laden with scorn and challenge. As the crowd murmured and shifted, Oiji watched from afar, his thoughts alight with intrigue at Alai's boldness in claiming the hearts of the unsettled masses. The artist, amidst this maelstrom of contempt and judgment, let forth a laugh, bitter and mocking, likening his fate to a burdensome chore passed from one to another. Alai, her countenance marked with a sneer of disdain, dismounted her steed and approached the condemned. With a mere gesture, a command unspoken yet understood, she signaled to her horsemen. The axe, thrown with deadly precision, found its mark upon the artist's head, cleaving it asunder and pinning him to the stone. The act, swift and brutal, left the crowd in a state of shocked silence, the execution's finality stark and unceremonious. Alai, her gaze never flinching from the path she had set, commanded silence and respect, declaring a debt owed by those who witnessed her decisive action. Denise de Carolingien, her mind unswayed by the horrors of death, approached the lifeless form of the artist. She observed the remnants of dark magic that clung to the corpse, sensing the lingering presence of arcane sigils, their intent malevolent even beyond the veil of death. Intent on sealing the sorcerer's fate, she prepared a prayer of divine intervention, a ritual to ensure that no power could resurrect the fallen mage. Calling upon Skinny for his sacred knowledge, Denise sought to comprehend the full extent of the dark magic that surrounded the artist's body. Skinny, aided by townsfolk claiming expertise in these shadowed arts, lent his counsel to the ritual. Together they completed the incantation, and a blessed seal formed, etching itself into and around the artist's body. Yet as Denise traced the perimeter of the seal, a sense of disquiet took hold. No soul seemed bound within. The sorcerer's essence was absent. Skinny, sharing in her observation, speculated that the artist might have forsaken his soul in exchange for the dark powers he wielded. Denise, her gaze sweeping across the square, pondered the implications of such a soulless existence. The nature of the sorcerer's pact, the depth of the dark magic at play, and the questions left unanswered by his demise wove a complex web of intrigue and uncertainty. Within the confines of his quarters, Willem Toth stood enshrouded in the mystic throes of a seance, his chamber bathed in a pale teal luminescence. This unearthly glow, born of the thinning veil betwixt the living and the dead, cast eerie shadows upon the walls. At the heart of this spectral rite, the soul of the artist hung suspended, caught within Willem's psychic grasp. Willem, with relentless determination, delved into the wisdom and memories of the artist, claiming the knowledge as his own. For a fleeting moment, Willem pondered the means to control the so-called darkness, only to discover that it was not darkness per se, but rather an absence of existence, a canvas unfulfilled. He learned from the artist's own confession that the erasure of everything was a deliberate act, intended to refresh their plane. The artist claimed that their previous world was fated for doom, and his actions had served to extend the lifespan of humanity. Doomed how? Willem queried within his mind, delving deeper into the artist's soul. He uncovered tales of potent magics, once wielded by powerful rogues, which had led to the decline of their plane. A new beginning, the artist insisted, was necessary. Willem, though, brushed aside the artist's self-righteous justification, focusing instead on the knowledge he sought. Introducing the artist's soul to its new abode, the confines of his own mind, Willem suggested, with a tone both commanding and practical, that the artist make himself useful by imparting his arcane secrets. The artist's soul, now bound to Willem, revealed a critical insight. To explore the master plane was to gain power, for each shadow unturned might reveal magics untold, manifesting in forms anew. As the seance concluded, Willem, his strength spent, slumped against the wall of his quarters. The voices of the departed, once a cacophony within his head, were now silenced, leaving only the artist's soul as his constant companion. Willem's thoughts, at last his own, pondered the path ahead. A knock at the door roused him from his reverie. Opening it, he found Skye awaiting him, her inquiry laced with both concern and anticipation. "Art thou still napping, or ready to depart?" she asked. Willem, gathering his sparse belongings, for he was ever a man who traveled light, joined Skye. Together they ventured northward from the settlement, towards the encroaching darkness that marked the boundary of the known and the unknown. As they reached the outskirts where the darkness grew denser, a figure emerged from the shadows. Zinhera, accompanied by Lazuli, awaited them. "Ye are late," Zinhera chided, her tone both jesting and earnest. "The first rogue adventuring party descends into the darkness north." As dawn's light broke over the settlement, a new day began, bringing with it a sense of relief and renewal. The air, once heavy with the weight of vengeance and sorrow, now echoed with the sounds of rebuilding. Across the settlement, the vision of Eden took form, the foundation for a rejuvenated community growing ever more robust. The efforts to restore what had been lost progressed apace, now unhampered by the distractions of recent trials. Amidst this resurgence, a band of rogues driven by a spirit of adventure and necessity prepared to embark on an expedition eastward. Their quest, to seek wood and other resources vital for the settlement's reconstruction. Oiji, resolved to join this venture, first attended to the well-being of El and Del, the young brothers he had safeguarded. He ensured they were well-provisioned and safe, his heart warmed by their resilience and spirit. However, as Oiji made to depart from the house, a series of ominous knocks resounded at his door. With a sense of foreboding, he answered, only to be met with a sight most unexpected. A civilian couple stood before him. At their appearance, El and Del, their voices alight with joy and disbelief, called out to their parents. The boys sprinted into the welcoming embrace of their long-lost kin. El and Del's parents, whom fate had spared, had returned. Oiji, beholding this reunion, felt a bittersweet wave of relief wash over him. He greeted the couple, ensuring their well-being. When inquired about their whereabouts, the father, his smile tinged with an unsettling eeriness, spoke of their separation amidst the chaos and their subsequent wanderings in the enveloping darkness. It was by some unknown guidance, he claimed, that they had found their way back to their children. Oiji, recounting his care for the boys, offered the family residence in the home he had secured for them. The parents, expressing their gratitude, politely declined, stating they had their own abode to return to. With heartfelt farewells, El and Del embraced Oiji, their young faces alight with the joy of reunion and the sorrow of parting. As Oiji watched the family depart, a myriad of emotions played across his visage. Relief for the safety and happiness of El and Del, curiosity at the peculiar circumstances of their parents' return, and a lingering sense of foreboding sparked by the father's cryptic words and unsettling smile. In the stillness of the would-be jailhouse, Samuel Andrews lingered, his thoughts adrift in contemplation of its restoration. His mind turned to the strange force-field magic wielded by Nazareth Lord, pondering its potential benefits for the settlement's defense and authority. Resolved, Samuel made his way to Eden's hospital, where Nazareth lay in a state of unconscious repose, his scales seared and visage maimed from recent trials. Beside Nazareth stood Eden, her hands deft in their work, administering charged poultices into his grievous wounds. She spoke with a healer's assurance, confident in Nazareth's recovery, citing his body's remarkable resilience. It was then that Asao returned, bearing tidings of her discoveries beyond the settlement. With great earnestness, she revealed to them a world transformed, its familiar landscapes now rendered alien and unknown. From her sack, she produced leathers and meats of creatures, unseen and unknown to Sam and Eden, a testament to the changed world that lay beyond their ken. Samuel, alarmed by Asao's revelations, hastened from the hospital, intent on warning Skinny, Denise, and Oiji, who had ventured into the darkness east of the settlement. Meanwhile, Eden, inspired by these new mysteries, envisioned the restoration of a network of contract work, a system dedicated to the gathering of knowledge and exploration. This network would unite rogues in need with those capable of venturing into the unknown. Entrusting Asao with the care of Nazareth, Eden departed to set her vision in motion. Asao, turning to Nazareth, found one of his eyes fixed upon her, a calm breath escaping his battered form. Samuel, reaching the edge of the settlement, realized that the party had already departed into the darkness. In that moment, Father Edmund, a figure both enigmatic and arcane, appeared at his side. With words of assurance, he vowed to guide the party, then vanished into the shadows. Father Edmund, moving through the darkness, found himself in a clearing. The obscurity momentarily lifted. He discerned a recently traveled path, and in the distance, the figures of Oiji, Denise, and Skinny. The darkness, he realized, was but a manifestation of the unknown. As he contemplated this revelation, a looming darkness gathered overhead, and a wind began to stir. Father Edmund, attuned to the whispers of the wind, listened intently. The wind, feigning the familiar voice he often heeded, spoke of the darkness calling for him. Yet his arcane sight revealed the dark magic entwined within the wind's essence. Recognizing the deceit, he banished the false wind from his senses. Suddenly, a true gust, forceful and pure, swept through the field, dispelling the shadowy impostor and nearly upending Edmund. This genuine wind bore with it a dire message. The maiden, a manifestation of darkness of unparalleled magnitude, still lingered in the master plane. The wind then imparted upon Father Edmund a quest of utmost import, to thwart the maiden's burgeoning influence during this great reset, and to guide powerful rogues away from her sway and towards their destined greatness. In the quietude of the evening, under the vast tapestry of stars, Ovaz stood solemnly, his countenance reflecting a deep reverence. He was there to perform a sacred rite, a service to Lantir, the crafting of a song of all suns. This ancient and hallowed song was a melodious chant, one that wove the history of realms touched by light and of those souls who lived and perished within its embrace. Gathering his thoughts and memories, Ovaz began to weave the song, his voice rising and falling with the rhythm of an age-old melody. The song spoke of the trials and tribulations faced by the settlement, a narrative etched in the echoes of light. Behold, the dawn of justice breaks upon the square where fate awakes. The artist, bound in chains of woe, stood judged by those he once did know. The roar of crowd, with vengeance cried, as Eden's vision in hope did bide. With hammer and saw they build anew a world from ashes in morning's dew. The trial, a spectacle of pain and ire, as darkness loomed a growing pyre. Nazareth in might did fall beneath the light that shone on all. Yet whispers linger in the night of maiden's shadow, void of light. Her darkness grows, a silent threat, a tale of woe, not woven yet. Into the dark, El and Del, the young brothers once safeguarded by Oiji, found themselves journeying with their parents, their path shrouded in shadow. The reunion, a moment of joy and relief, was tinged with an undercurrent of unease, as their destination remained unknown to all but their guiding kin. Their journey, winding and obscure, brought them to the edge of a precipice, a cliff overlooking a vast expanse swallowed by shadows. Here the air was charged with a familiar, palpable energy, a sense of knowing and a revelation that began to unfurl from within the darkness in their hearts. Upon this cliff, a congregation was gathered, their forms silhouetted against the dim light of the stars. At the center of this assembly stood Maxime Mori, who bore gifts for the children, for his family. Around him, the people chanted in a low, haunting cadence, their voices weaving spells of dark devotion. Their parents lead them into the heart of the gathering, revealed themselves as part of this clandestine assembly. El and Del, eyes wide with wonder, slowly began to remember the truth of existence and the salvation they strived for. The congregation, their chants rising and falling with the rhythm of Maxime's ancient rite, enveloped them as Maxime bestowed upon them gifts of the darkness, empowering them, solidifying their tether to the maiden, as it should be. Maxime's voice melds with the chorus of his followers. The chant, a hymn to the maiden, grew in intensity, as did their numbers, hundreds of voices echoing across the cliff and into the depths of the master plane.